everyone. How are you? We're at the end of the day, and I'm sure you're a bit over it. My head is kind of spinning from all the things that I've learnt so far. But I am not here to give you 3 takeaways. I'm probably not going to give you a QR code, and I'm really not going to give you any directives of what to do in design. I'm going to tell you a story, actually. And before I start, I want to acknowledge that we're standing on a place of story, and I'd like to acknowledge the people, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to start my story in a place called New York City. I have a really vivid memory of standing between 2 huge garbage piles, and I was sort of waving goodbye to my then boyfriend, who was on a flight back to Australia. And I, with my 1 suitcase and 1 saved contact, was going to go up to the Upper West Side, and I was going to go live in someone's living room from Craigslist and try and make it in New York. And I kind of did, in a way. I forged personal networks. I built a career working with some of the most prominent brands in the world. And I also started a consultancy with some like-minded people who were really focused on having an impact when it came to materials, design, and sustainability. And after 8 years, a pandemic hit, so I found myself headed back home, had a few more boxes this time. I also had some really cool experience, and I had, some intel from the front lines of innovation. I was really amped to bring it back to Australia and help us accelerate in our mission for sustainability. But what happened next? Nothing. Truly nothing. I couldn't get a call back. I couldn't get a client. I couldn't get a job interview for something I was really overqualified. And I really just had this feeling that it was because I was young and it was because I was a woman. And I didn't have something that is handed often very freely to men. I didn't have credibility. So I started to think, what is going to give me the credibility I need? And I decided that it was likely going to be a PhD. If I was a doctor, I'd be taken seriously, and none of those other things would matter. So I set out on a bit of a mission, and I spoke to some people who had their PhD, people who were mid-thesis, knee-deep in research. And then I also spoke to, people like me thinking about doing it and why they would want to do it. Sort of the collective response to me was, don't do it unless you're really passionate, unless it's something that's really going to, motivate you for all those years, and it's something you can pour your heart and soul into. And what I pour my heart and soul into is having an impact. So I really thought, okay, if I'm going to do a PhD, it's got to be about the root cause of sustainability. I really want to get at it. I really want to make a difference. And if I'm going to spend all that time and get myself some credibility, let's really think about what the root cause of sustainability is. So you're going to come on my journey a little bit on how I thought about all of this. So I started where I always do, at materials, because I am living in a material world and I am a material girl. Materials are everywhere. What do I mean when I say materials? It's the cement that this building's made from, it's the timber in your homes, it's the plastic in your packaging, or the mycelium maybe. And what I really like about materials is that they're the one constant that is touched from the people that extract, to the mines that specify, to the markets that sell, to the processes that recover. We're all just touching materials in some kind of way. So really, I thought about what is this world made of? And I wanted to go all in on this. So I've traveled, I've researched, I've found the most amazing material innovations. They're out there and they exist. Let's take, for instance, the tree. Trees are, provided they are managed responsibly, incredible. They not only sustain our life, but they can be replenished with each generation of human. Now, at a molecular level, trees are kind of made up of 2 things. There's cellulose, which is the fibrous structure, and then there's lignin, which is the glue that holds it all together, bio-based glue. And cellulose is a really interesting material. It's found in a lot of different places. You would likely have done craft with it as cellophane when you were a kid. It's in your shredded cheese as an anti-caking agent. And what we find when we shrink these fibers down, these cellulose fibers down to like a nanoscale, it starts to open up new possibilities for us. One of the most interesting is fire retardancy. So most fire retardancies, coatings, they usually are really high in formaldehyde, VOCs. They're off-gassing into our lungs, into our nervous system, cancer, hormone disruption. It's not great. But this coating, what it does is it creates an invisible, naturally derived, non-toxic barrier that oxygen can't reach the surface. And if fire can't breathe, then it cannot burn. The other half of this equation is lignin. And lignin has been historically a byproduct of the paper production industry. We kind of burned it off for energy for a long time. And we've just sort of discovered that it actually has a lot of potential when it comes to alternatives for petroleum-based plastics, for resins and composites, even carbon fibers, lightweight, high-strength materials. This is really gorgeous. It's really chemically complex. It's full of carbon. It's really, really an interesting variable material. So the truth is, if all of these materials exist, why are they not out here? Why are they not in our homes? Why haven't we seen them? I see these things over and over again, and yet we're yet to implement. So it can't be materials. It has to be who chooses those materials. So it's all about who's making those decisions of what we do with those materials. And they are designers like yourselves. And before I was a material girl, I was an industrial designer. And for those who don't know, this is a very digital space, but we are the ones who sort of specify how things look, feel, and work for mass production. And for a long time, we've sort of thought that mass production and sustainability don't really go hand in hand. And that's not true, because this is a chair you've likely all sat on, maybe in a waiting room, maybe at a cafe, and you've probably never noticed it before. What you don't notice is that this is one of the first pieces of mass-produced furniture. It was designed in 1859, and it was one of those pieces that we were able to bend wood through heat and pressure rather than carving it out, the first time we could do that. 6 pieces, 6 screws, 2 nuts, and you can fit 36 of them in 1 cubic meter for shipping. So sustainable design, mass production, not so much of an issue. The big issue is that design has been hijacked. Planned obsolescence, so your products are designed to break, fall out the market, so you have to go back in and buy them again. Black box design, so we're locking it down in the name of IP so that you can't repair or fix or repurpose parts. And even in gender bias. So I was one of 5 industrial design students. I had 0 design teachers, and only 19% of industrial designers today are women. So that's got me asking, okay, so it's not about what, it's not about how, but why? Like, why is design now sort of filling this bigger system? And I started to think, if things are built to break, you have to buy more. If we're banned from fixing them, we have to buy more. If we're a woman, we likely have to buy more. And that, my friends, is capitalism. Overconsumption isn't natural. It is not fulfilling. It is engineered into our way of lives. And I believed for a while that behavior change and innovative systems design could pull us out of this. If you've seen this big, beautiful diagram before, you know it's something called the circular economy. And in theory, it is beautiful. It's brilliant. We're decoupling economic growth from resource consumption. And we do that through resell, repair, reuse, even to the back end of recycle and composting. The thing is, though, we know, and in my clients we know, that as soon as your profit goes up, so does your Scope 3 emissions. So if we're making money and the goal is to always have increasing shareholder profits, we're always going to have an increase in emissions. And it sort of ends up being this like snake catching its tail, rather than a closed loop. And circular design, unfortunately, becomes like a high-functioning denial. Now, capitalism, we're sort of told that it's markets, right? It's all about private ownership and freedom of market, and we're really stuck in this political binary of like, do we have regulation versus non-regulation, or governments versus corporations? And when you really think about it, capitalism isn't a market system. It's a class system. It's governments, financial institutions, and corporations collectively collaborating, not competing. They're colluding together to make sure that resources stay out of the hands of many and are concentrated in the few. And when I say these resources, I mean land, I mean water, I mean data, I mean labor, even seeds, they're now privatizing. So we have a lot to lose. And this guy, Adam Smith, he's a white guy, shocker. He's called the father of modern economics. Sort of his writings really shaped what we understand today as modern economics. And I do think we've taken some liberties with his words, but basically he stated that people wouldn't be acting out of altruism, they would only act in their own self-interest. But what he didn't account for was there's these whole swaths of people working in altruism. Often they're unpaid, often they're overlooked, and more often than not, they're women. And the kicker is, Adam Smith lived with his mum his whole entire life. Like, up until his adulthood, he was living with his mother, who was cooking his food, cleaning his house, and making his life able to function so he could write some of the most interesting economic ideas. Ladies, if you feel mental load or invisible, then you need to think that these are not bugs of a system. They are features. They have been built in. So, maybe it's not a PhD about why this is all happening, but when did we start to think that we could have infinite growth in a finite world, and we could just keep taking and taking and taking? Because this logic of erasure and entitlement, it didn't really start at an economic ideology. It started as a foundation of global power, and that's colonialism. I'll hold your hand while we go through this, so I don't get cancelled and you don't get offended. But I think that I have a sort of unique perspective on this, because as I stand before you, I, in this body, am both the colonised and the coloniser. I am Indian and English, and I live on Australian land. And I think it gives me a really unique perspective in the sense that I can understand what my proximity to whiteness has afforded me. I can see it very clearly in big and small ways. And I can also understand, you know, the hard thing that it is to confront the fact that we have our modern lives today because at some point down the line, it's been taken unfairly from other people. And my invisible labour may be infuriating and rude in some sense, but it's also not the exploitation that many women around the world today face. About 50 million people are in modern slavery today, and 71% of those people are women. 1 in 10 of them are children. And they make about $150 billion of illegal profit for companies we buy for. So often when I talk about sustainability, I get a carbon report and a sustainability document and all these beautiful things. But if you can't tell me how much you're paying your labour force and things get really murky through there, it's greenwashing and I don't want it. So here we go. We're at the tipping point. Now we need to understand who benefits from all of this. Because the idea would be that whoever's winning the game maybe rigged the system. And that is the patriarchy, my friends. We have arrived. This is probably a good place to state that a patriarchy is not a gender. It's a system. And females, males, transgender, non-binary, we can all fall prey to this mindset. And basically the mindset is that men should control power, they should dominate in spaces where decisions are being made, we should look up to them for authority, and we should sort of pull ourselves back and let them lead. And I started to wonder why we all sort of believe this. Why do we believe this story? Because all of these things are made up, right? Authority, power, we get to decide what they are. And then I started to think that whatever religion you are, even if you're not religious, likely your God is a man. And you have been told through words in a book to believe, to worship, to have faith, maybe even to fear this man. And whether we agree in our religion or not, what we can agree on is that it is a story. It is a faith that we're buying into when we're doing this. And juxtapose that against Mother Earth, who unfortunately is a woman. We can see her, we can touch her, we can taste her, we can feel her. And she's really providing us the sustenance and the life force that we have today. Yet we render her invisible, we exploit from her, we extract from her, and we're sort of not believing our eyes when we see her downfall. So, great. All I have to do to support my knowledge, my intelligence, my global network, my passion, I just have to get a PhD in bringing down the patriarchy. That's all I need to do for some credibility. Credibility, here I come. Let me take that on, right? But what happened next? I didn't get my PhD. I got pregnant. Yeah, it didn't do much for my credibility, I'll tell you that. But it did give me something else entirely. It gave me something that maybe I probably wouldn't have gotten if I did a degree. And I did get, the love of my life, a baby. I got a child. But I also got this very deep sense of knowing. And the knowing is a deep connectedness that I feel now. And I know now that, no, I don't want equality. Not in this hellscape that men have created. I don't want a seat at that table. I want a new table. Maybe I want a couch so I can relax every now and again. And I now know that the reason why maybe we feel like we're in a dark part of history, maybe this all feels like a lot and too much and that we can't do it. And I know that's because we're in labor. So there are 3 stages of labor, if you don't know. There's the first part, you're contracting, you're dilating, it hurts like hell, it's really, really bad. And then there's the second part where you're pushing out the baby, it's coming to life, and then you give birth to the placenta, and you've achieved it, well done. Now, between the first part and the second part, there's this verbal cue that every birth giver gives. It's so universal and so common that actually they train doulas, they train midwives, they train doctors, that when the birthing person says these words, let's all move to action, let's all get ready, she's going to do it. This is when it's happening. We're moving from the first one to the second one. And those words are, I can't do this. Ladies, am I right? In some way or another, there is a knowledge that when she's actually doing it is when she says, I can't do this. So if I leave you with nothing else here today, I'm going to let you know that we can do this. We're probably doing it more than we've ever done it before, and it's probably going to be messy and hurt, and it's going to suck, but it's also going to be really, really worth it because we are going to give birth to a new life. And I think it's going to be a girl. Thank you. Thank you very much.